So nowadays, especially this year since the COVID-19 broke out, online curating has become like a big issue. But the ideas of online curating or internet-based artworks were already happening in the 80s in different parts of the world. So in this project, we're going to discuss three topics. And in a following section, I will present comparisons between online and offline curating. And together with Daniela, we will present like the history of Net.art and how art is related to different network technology in different regions. So I think it is really this context of COVID-19 plus digitalization and globalization that we start to think of this idea of online curating. And also when we are making exhibition, we start to think about how technology affect our body, affect how curators and the audience work in the exhibition context. And when we think of online curating, usually we think of an example like this. This is an exhibition happening online recently. This is like a 3D model of a physical exhibition. And then you can enter it like you went to a normal gallery with sculpture and painting, and then you can go inside. And this is like maybe the first thought of digital curating. And the second example is sorry. Wait, I'm going outside the, okay, the other is like, where? Here. Yeah. You can see the link, right?
Yes.
Okay, the other example is it's like 360 video of a museum, and then plus some animation. Is a museum in Belgium. Okay, this is maybe what the two example when we think of digital curating. Some other example is like a website that they just put a photograph or archive of the artwork in that website. And well, that's what we think of online curating usually. But we think these examples is more similar to like offline curating, like they didn't use some kind of specific trace or special trace of internet or website to make exhibition, because like the UI experience, and there are also lots of more creative ways of using website that is not just simply mimicking a physical exhibition. And so we start to research a kind of artwork called Net.art. And because Net.art is like they consider internet culture or the UI design as a creative new mode of experience of an exhibition. And yeah, so we are finding like example that incorporate the specificity of the medium or meta thinking of the website or internet culture in general. So that's why when we were firstly researching online curating, then we start to search history of Net.art. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, I think that those examples are very clear because it shows that the general strategies when we talk about digital curating is this sort of digitalization of the artwork. And as you said, I just wanted to highlight this importance of the mimicking of an offline exhibition. Like there is an interest in mimicking the experience of when you get inside a space, an exhibition space, and how you can get to know more about the artworks, etc. So in this, that is why for us there was not so much interests in continuing researching about digital curating, but mainly we were moved into looking what happened with the internet and what happened with the possibilities of a website and the art world in previous times. So in a way, this all this intense interest that took place during the COVID-19 pandemic and this impossibility to move from our place, we started because of that to look at digital curating, but then we very fastly we moved into looking a little bit back into art history, and that is when we found other type of artwork, that's Net.art, that we're going to discuss more in detail later.
Yeah. So now, after although we are going to changing to the idea of Net.art, but before we get into that, we still want to discuss a little bit about the difference between online and offline curating, so can give you sort of a bridge of our lines of thought. Okay, so now I will start with my personal experience and then some literature review of the comparison between online and offline curating. Okay, so this is an exhibition I did this year that it is a website art, and we have a website and then also a offline exhibition. So in 2020, this time, like actually making a website is not that difficult compared to in the 80s when the internet just started. But the thing is now, if you launch a website without connecting to social media, no one would actually look at it. So this is just my personal experience of this project Eucornia I did, that I think actually website in 2020 this time, it is more like an archive than like a thing that people can look around, because now there are too many links and too many information every day. And actually I feel like if I'm launching a website, I have to put on social media or newsletter. And although I'm not controlled by like our institution, but I feel I'm like controlled by the algorithm of Facebook or Instagram and my personal network of media coverage. So when I decided to have a physical exhibition where I put this website in a gallery, and it was like out of my expectation, that actually I created more network than just putting this website online, because before I want to make a website because I want to be international or not controlled by institution. But actually when I made it into a physical exhibition, I was in the exhibition and I can have one-on-one talk to the audience, and I can also observe how people use their mouse to click the website and what are their reactions. Because when it was not in a physical exhibition, I sent to lots of friends, and I think not everyone actually look at it or take the time to dig to it, because the website, we have lots of images, and it's also a sort of a meta website that you have to spend a lot of time to actually using. But when I just send online, I really believe that not all of my friends that they really look at it. But when it was in an exhibition setting, it created a kind of contemplation space. So yeah, and that's what I realized, actually, that maybe the situation is different from the age till now, that now website is really not something you will take your time to digging unless you are really researching on it. Yeah. Dania, you want to say something?
Yeah, and this opinion and experience that you got, I think it's also we could also um, go into that when we talked with other artists that had a lot of experience with Net.art in the past, and because they, for example, like Brian McKern and Vuk Kosick, that you will be able to learn more about them in other videos from our project. But they both mentioned the fact that for them, creating websites and working online was very important at the beginning, in the, we could say, from the 90s to 2000s. But then what they are really interested now is in the actual experience of being in the same space and having contact with other people. So it's creating these atmospheres and these situations that, although we can they can be proposed from a website, it's not so strong, the effect, or it's more individual than when we have the experience of an exhibition, that it's much more a collective experience.
Yeah.
So sorry, could we say that then it's, from your experience, you think that, and this is also in relation to other things that we have read, I mean, we should work more in thinking not in the binary of online and offline, but more in something that there's like a constant articulation of these two.
yeah, I think there's no binary, and the point actually is like how to create a network. That's the real point in internet. Is just, I mean, it's not just a tool, but the whole internet culture that we are still developing, and we are still transforming these into artworks and creating relationships between audience and curators, because we created more through Facebook or Instagram when we have to launch a website now, because if you didn't put them in social media, no one will look at it. But what we really want is like a more genuine connections. So that's why when we put in the physical exhibition, we create some kind of events that people can draw on the window together. And so this kind of connection that somehow ironically I feel it's more at the core of my work, because this part of the work is about post-colonial and hybrid identity. And but when I just put online, I think people are looking at a distant. But if they draw each other together on the physical side, I think it's more like respond to the issue I want to discuss. And also it's a more reflective space. Yeah, here I want to like present some of my ideas about, like, this is the picture of the exhibition and this is the website, and we put a wireless mouse and then show on a TV. So it's a really simple setting, but it makes the website like sort of a small installation, because it's big, it's like a TV screen, not a computer laptop. So it's bigger. And I just thought, in general, I feel people have if it's a bigger screen, larger screen, it create a contemplative space for the audience, and it resonates with what Susan Sontag argued, that the spectatorship of photography of distant suffering. She said that if it's the is large size photographs like hanging in a museum gives the spectator a space of contemplation. So yeah, I mean, this traditional format of institution, like I was really, I want to rebuild it actually at the beginning, but then after I made this exhibition, I kind of know some of the good parts of making a physical exhibition, because I really hope that the works are so provoking, not just a glimpse, you know. And
Exactly. Sorry, can I add something? I think that this is very valuable, and that what we should conserve is more the possibility that the institution has of creating these moments of encounter and of actually being in the same space. But also, I think we, as I said before, I think it's a matter of having the two possibilities and articulating both. It's not only, I think, from after our experience, it's not only about the website or not only about the physical exhibition, but it's this possibility of also thinking that the fact that your project is available in online and people can interact from their house, it becomes more accessible to people that cannot travel, or people who simply cannot move from their house. So I think that it's about analyzing the two possibilities of each condition.
yeah, of course, putting it online there, we can reach people from other regions and have more accessibility. But there's also this problem of we are overexploited by too many images. And I think when Susan Sontag comparing the like large size image in a museum, she was comparing between like lots of photos of distant suffering on news, and that is more, you know, fleeting and quick, and you couldn't have a reflection or empathy on the distant suffering,
Exactly,
the
yeah.
representation of distant suffering. And also in a similar fashion that you know, like Roland Barthes, he argues that filmic medium is fleeting, and printed photograph, you know, become an object of contemplation. And if we apply this to Net.art, is like, I think Net.art is even more fleeting, you know, than film, and then all the news on the photograph. And so this is something I'm thinking, like now this website I presented in a more traditional way, that is like a semi-installation art instead of a laptop, but actually it somehow works, I think, better than just put online. So I think maybe if I can have a chance to develop, it's like if you want to put some artwork online website, it's not just putting it and making it a website, but you have to design a model or a set of tools that are suitable for the internet culture, so it can like organically continue to form a dialogue through the internet culture, like tagging. I just make really simple, but I think there are better ways, like tagging or story or games or something that people can keep involving and keep having a dialogue. Otherwise, the website will just be like an archive frozen in the fridge, and
Exactly.
no one
Yeah,
will.
I agree, and this is something that that we will expand more when we go more in detail to the characteristics of Net.art.
Yeah. So I think for this, I think the real concern now about Net.art or online curating in general is actually uh, how to make a contemplation place, and how to use the model of internet culture to create a mechanism of participation, and which is the title of this PowerPoint. And and in the next section, I'm going to do a little bit literature review of the comparison between online and offline curating. Um, the main text I'm quoting are these two reference. The first one is a Dutch researcher called Josephine Bosma. She's one of the pioneer on researching Net.art in Europe. And the other is this text that I found that is the one of the earliest symposium on the future of digital curating in Taiwan, which was held in 2000 August with curators and technology company CEO and digital art institutions leaders. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
First of all, that we will provide all the bibliography that we have reviewed by the end of the presentation. So if anybody is interested, they can look at it. And second, that for us, when approaching the history of Net.art, it was very important, and this is something that Xian Yun is going to expand more, but it was very important to approach it from our regions. So we will use a pretty varied production of knowledge and theory from different parts of the world.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so this is a small form that I made. It's my perspective plus summarize of Bosman and the symposium's idea. I think also from my personal experience that when I did my website project, I didn't call myself curator because I feel I'm not a curator but a producer. And when I researched, actually it was mentioned in lots of texts about that when you are doing online curating, you are more like a producer because the curator in a traditional sense is in a museum context is you selected artists and bringing them together as a collective. But some of the net art, or at least the one I did, was like I'm really involving even in the UI design or visual design and the whole concept together in the construction of the website. So in this sense, if you are involving in the construction of the artwork and the whole website together, it's more like a producer. And it's not just playing with terms, but also in the sense that producer participate in creating content together with the artist. Because I mean, there are lots of ways of curation, but usually it's like the artist create the artwork themselves and the curator just select them. They didn't have this sense of co-create like in the material way or the construction of the details. I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, I think it's clear. I think that maybe what we can also expand on is that at least from my own experience, when we're talking about curating, it works very differently in every case, and it works very differently according to if you're working with an institution, if you're working in a more independent way, with what kind of arts or disciplines you're working with. And so from my perspective, I think it's much better and much more interesting to leave it as a more open concept and as a more open role that each practitioner embraces in a different way. I think that it is very interesting that you can recall on your own experience that you didn't feel that you were doing the work of a curator at the moment, but then you realized that that you actually were. But it's more this in between area of being a curator, a producer, an artist. And I think that it's more about the importance of realizing that there is a lot of creative work, a lot of administrative work, and production work that it's involved in actually any of the roles, because in contemporary art, I think that we realize that even artists have to deal with a lot of more administrative work. So it leaves us dealing in an ecology where each practitioner has to enact different roles, and I think that makes it much more interesting.
Yeah, so now in the symposium I mentioned in the last can you go? Okay, in this symposium in Taiwan, that I translate on page 422. Like the curator Hon Haiming, she had this idea that she said in the seminar that in online curating, the role of the curator is weaker because every reader here, the reader refers to the audience or the user of the exhibition. When they are reading, they are already like a curator. Yeah, and also in Josephine Bosman's books, Net.art, when she was talking about conservation and archive of an online work, she also mentioned that in the digital domain, the curator, conservator, and archivist all become a co-producer of an artwork. Yeah, and I think this is also why there's at the early beginning of Net.art, as lots of literature said that actually the Net.art invades the authority or threaten the authority of the curator. So it is also can show that traditional art gallery or museum are not so important in the context of Net.art. And also some net artists claim that they were doing Net.art as activists with this attempt to rebuild the institution. And at this we will discuss in other video section with work classics talk and also general discussion. So there's this idea of the Net.art as an anti-institutional forces at the early age, but of course not all the, we are not generalizing all the Net.art works, but just some people have argued that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that when it's interesting what you say that, and when we are talking about those more like general characteristics of Net.art, it's important to remember that we're talking mainly from the research of Josephine Bosma, which she has done one of the most extensive research of Net.art, but she's based in Europe. So later, when we look at more what happened in Net.art in South America, Latin America, mainly Argentina, Uruguay, we will see that the story goes a little bit different. And I think that this is very interesting to see all the contrasts.
Yeah, actually, the Josephine Bosma's argument and the webinar held in Taiwan there, I find lots of similar points. And the second comparison in terms of audience is also in page 426, like Chen Zhenran. He said in that webinar that online curating, the user become the producer. So I think this is, again, this idea of something become producer is because there's this open participation in the format of internet culture or website that everyone can sort of more participate in a more equal places, or this statement that internet as a democratic medium. So then you confuse about the traditional stratification of work, or you have less hierarchy. And the second part is, of course, easy to understand that Net.art has lots of engagement and participation in comparison to traditional art form, which I'm referring to sculpture or painting. Of course, they have less like engagement and participation, um, but but I mean, also some art critics says that even in a physical exhibition, you have this embodied viewing. So this is still debatable. What's your position of body in an online exhibition and offline exhibition? And I think when Josephine Bosma, she's comparing these two different mediums. She said these really good points. I want to quote. It's like she argues, it was also in this book, Netitude, in page 60, that the difference between art and net art, her art means sculpture and painting. Like, okay, the difference between art and net art lies in the key issue is engagement or participation. In traditional art forms like painting and sculpture, everything revolves around perspective, which basically involves the eyes. And in net art as well as media art, perspective has shifted from the point of seeing to what Canadian sociologist director Kirchhoff calls the point of being. So here in this form, I wrote about points of being and points of seeing. But this part discussion about what the relation between the body and the exhibition, we will discuss more during that section that we invite some performance artists and new media artists to deal with this issue, because I think it's a good good separation at the beginning. But when I think deeper, actually, I think it's not that easy because seeing involve body as well. So this is not like a dichotomy, how to pronounce? Dichotomy, like, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it involves the whole body in both cases, and these are like very analytical perspectives that have been very helpful for us to approach the medium, but also, at least from my way of thinking, I think that our idea is always to try to think more in an articulated way and not separating so much one thing and the other, right?
Yeah, there are lots of false separation.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then come to this the problem of narrative difference. I think in what happened? Sorry, is the logic of database and data visualization, nonlinearity, and participation. This is lots of literature. They emphasize this when they're talking about online curating or net art in general. But I mean, website can be linear as well, and it's really, I think, also when I think of using narrative as categorization, I have some problem, because I think lots of net art actually, some they don't have a narrative. They just put data in a different way instead of a traditional narrative. What I mean is like a filmic narrative or a novel that has this structure. So I think narrative is no longer the term that we need to use in terms of net art if we want to find the unique traits of net art. But of course, there's this idea that all mediums, they are sort of mixed up. Like medium is message, like McLuhan's medium is message. But what I want to stress that I think some net artists, they have narrative, but they are like sort of using other mediums idea of narrative. But what's special about or unique about net art is more these kind of new ways of reorganizing data, which has informed to a traditional narrative like in film and in novel. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I would add to that that the possibility of having links and hyperlinks and of all the time going to one part of the website to another, that's what allows, or maybe why they are talking about a non-linear narrative. um, but it is true that many, and we will see some examples, but some net artworks are just also a data visualization of traditional narratives or ways of creating a narratives, right? So it's more than that.
Yeah, and this body part we will discuss more in our webinar on January 21 with performance artists. And the last one is about the accessibility, because at the beginning when the internet like arrived in the world, that everyone, I mean not everyone, but lots of people are like excited and think, oh, we created this open platform, open source and democratic medium, but actually uh, the internet or this is create another exclusive community, and this is debatable, and we will discuss this more in another video with Rock and also Daniela on the accessibility or participatory game stuff. So I won't go into details, but there are two examples in Taiwan that is really good for this discussion. One is G0V, the other one is Zheng Shuli's new work, Forking Pirating, that I will Kingdom of Piracy, that I will explain in another video. Okay, now I'm going to go into this like our main topic of what is Net.art. So before we compare what are the different characteristics of online curating and offline curating and why we think is really necessary to go back to this part of history of Net.art so that we can think deeper, not just fall into this idea of curating. Okay, and here we are using Josephine Bosman's definition of Net.art. She argued that Net.art is art based in or on internet cultures. These are in constant flux. Net.art spaces in internet cultures means that a physical, like hardwired or wireless connection to the internet is not necessary in individual net artworks. A net artwork can exist completely outside of the net. Okay, so this is different because usually you thought net, I mean, at least for me at the beginning, I thought net art just referred to website art.
Yeah, and I will, and later when I speak about the definitions given more by Argentinian theorists, we will find a complete different definition. So this is something that was interesting for us as well, to be able to contrast. And we will find that there are some tendencies to consider that net art can only happen inside the net. So I think that because of Josephine Bosma really extensive research, and she has been in touch with net artists for so long, is that she has arrived to this definition that it's much more open and that allows to think, as Xian Yun said, that net artwork can exist completely outside of the net. So we were interested in giving this more expanded definition.
Yeah, so when I'm drawing this, I really was like changing so much a lot on like how to draw this circle, if it's together, outside or inside. But I just want to explain that at first I thought net art is just website art. but actually it's really just a really technological definition. And then it's a broader sense that include internet culture, but there's also a specific earlier net artist that was pinpointed by Bosma in Europe, and in mainly like in Europe, that in 19 start from 1980s, and this sort of group formed with NetTime and all other like events. And if they also go to some, or to what they call fancy art festival and museum, that it's starting to form like a collection, although Bosman doesn't want, but I think after she writes her book, it sort of collects. So this is what I mean by this part. And but what he what she why can I not go to the next PowerPoint? Okay, so but she was really conscious of the methodology of history, and she doesn't want to be Eurocentrism, but of course she's from Europe, so it's difficult to reach people from the other region. And but it's really cool that she argues that net art is not a movement, it's more a transition and ongoing evolution of the practice and reception of art, culture, as well as science and academia, which stimulated by the advent of new network technology. So here you can see that she's arguing it's not a movement like traditional art history interpretation usually is like one period manifesto at a group of artists, and they created a movement, and then is a next movement. That's the how normal linear art historians narrative think. She wants to distinct herself to this kind of narrative. So it's not a movement, but a transition. Also, she doesn't say internet or like a specific technological device, but like a term that is network technology. So it's a broader definition. And she also wants to give Net.art a more discursive, a more like a definition in process. So she said that it's no consistent properties and lack of a shared manifesto style or approach. And she quoted a lot of Bukowski's idea in her book. And here I think this is really informative, so I will share with you that Net.art departed from all notions of art movements and media art to enter history more as a virus than a discipline. Bukowski sees his training as an archaeologist put to new use. How come that an archaeologist is working on the internet? He suggests that Net.art is an archaeology of the future. And so here we can have this sort of a summary of the definition of Net.art by Bosma, that she wants to make an anti-linear art history interpretation of Net.art. So it's anti-history. And also she wants to make a definition that is anti-movement and anti-median specificity. I don't know if you know median specificity. It means that it's like from a modernism aesthetic that every medium, when you want to do it best, you have to do the thing that is only specific of that medium, then that's the best artist. So they go to this extreme that, okay, maybe flatness is the most specific and distinct trait of a painting, so you make a painting that is completely flat. And so when and lots of literature about net art, they are using this old perspective of medium specificity, because they try to lay out, oh, what are the traits of net art, what are the similarities, and what are the things that only net art can do it, the other medium cannot do. And this is what Bosma wants to avoid in her definition. And in our project, we want to do like a kind of review of, oh shit, I will cut out this. Is the in our whole project we want to do a methodology, of course, anti-Eurocentrism, because I'm from Taiwan and Danya is from Latin America. Yeah, but it's quite difficult. Yeah, I have to say that we need.
I would add that our aim in this project is also to add, as Josephine Bosma says, this aim of being anti-history, anti-movement, anti-medium specificity. But because of our places of origin and where we are, we have lived most of our life, myself in Argentina and Uruguay, and Xian Yun in Taiwan, we have focus more in researching which is the art production, the Net.art production of these two areas. And of course, without ignoring what happened in Europe and US, because those were the areas where there was a wider development and both of text production and artwork, and it's where most of the institutions that have been more interested in Net.art are located. So our perspective is to also dig into art practices and art theories that have produced content from outside Europe, and be able to reflect within this complexity and these different points of view.
Okay, great.